So like I don't know if I um one of my friends a couple days ago was like um well so I don't when I was on the Nobody is a Nobody podcast, I think we talked about, but I don't know if we did, that I expected there to be a major conflict with Russia or China.
Hmm.
Yeah. And like one of my friends the other day was like, remember, because I sent out basically a investor trends letter last year, and I was like, yeah, I expect a potential military conflict with China or Russia, and then talked about all these different asset classes,
Right.
what I expected cryptocurrencies to do, and those have behaved how I expected. And it's just like I think sometimes stuff is pretty predictable if you cut out the noise, because there's always kind of like this buildup towards, like you said earlier, like it's like it just happens all at once,
Right.
but it's kind of like a pot filling with water, and then it all at once it starts flowing over, basically.
Yeah. And I think when you add in the time equation, we won't necessarily go super philosophical, but maybe a little philosophical. So I think about where I put my spare time in over the past week since we last recorded. I've spent probably about 5 hours studying the NBA, learning
Interesting.
what makes certain players special, as opposed to, I mean, because everybody that plays in the NBA, everybody that plays in the NBA is a top basketball. You know, they're in the top 2%, or well, top 0.000% of the world that
Yeah.
plays basketball. Um, and how even in there, there's such a bifurcation, a hierarchy, so to speak, of who's the great ones and who are just like role players and who are bench warmers. Like these guys suck so bad; they're better than everybody else, but they don't even get off
Yeah,
the bench
definitely.
for a minute a game. I've spent about 10 hours working on improv for various things. One, because I'm trying out with a group of people, seeing if that clicks and if that's something where I can move forward. And I'm still doing some tech stuff with improv um, and just kind of trying to learn the story, learn how to do that better. Um, I've spent another 10 to 20 hours reading books of various things, fiction, nonfiction, history. I won't lie, some of that was basketball, so there's maybe some overlap there. And then I've spent a few hours watching TV, specifically just watching TV show with my wife or whatever. Um, and so right there, what is that? About 30 hours or so, give or take. Um, so I've spent about 30 hours kind of goofing around, and I'm like, I can tell you exactly, almost to the minute, how much I've actually focused on Ukraine after we last recorded. Maybe 7 minutes. Um,
Well, it's kind of like totally out of your control, right?
yeah, well, I mean, but so is the NBA. Um,
Yeah, but
but
you're, like I feel like sometimes it's hard to concentrate on stuff like that. And there's it's with these wars between major powers, there's always kind of like a different narratives that go through it. I kind of I don't know. It's some people might call war a sport too, where people
yeah,
die. So
well, in fact, one of the books I was reading was talking about the history of Dungeons and Dragons, and it was talking about how the player base originally came from playing war games,
yeah.
um, board games and stuff that, and it was such a small market, like maybe 300 to 500 people worldwide were interested in playing this, and like anytime there was a convention, all of them showed up. And so it was talking about how scary it was to actually launch a new style of game, which ended up being Dungeons and Dragons at the time. And but they were all playing these obscure war games that you and I have probably never heard of unless you've just got um, a penchant for those war games. Um, but I also think about what if this because I know in World War II, I mean, I did a lot of sports history because, you know, like everybody else in America, I thought maybe someday I'd be great at sports. So instead of actually getting good at sports, I spent my time reading and watching and stuff. But
Building your mind.
yeah, that's it. So, you know, when World War II happened, all these baseball players and basketball players, NFL players, they left the leagues in kind of shambles to go serve, do their duty for the country. But I think of specifically the NBA right now, more so than NFL and Major League Baseball. If there's a world war, how is that going to shake up the NBA? Because there's been such an influx of European players I mean, it's been happening since the '90s specifically,
Yeah.
but right now, it's such a high peak. You know, it's uh, almost like, what is it, 85-90% of all the white guys in the NBA now are from Europe, because that's where the white players are from now. And it's there's some people from other countries as well, but mostly, you know, like one of the top players in the world, Luka Doncic, he is from Slovenia. And like thinking, you know, what happens if World War III happens? Does he get called back up? Does you know, do some of these players, and he probably won't because he's this super famous person and it's not 1942 or 1935 or anything anymore. But does the NBA end because of so many allegiances between countries? Because you've got some Russian players there. You know, read another book on hockey. I read a lot of sports. What can I say? That's talking about. I mean, you've got three major countries for NHL: Canada, United States, and Russia. Those are the three major countries. And what does that look like based on the current events? Do the players defect like they did in the 70s and 80s? Do they just not care? Or is now there do we not trust like one of the greatest hockey players ever right now, Ovechkin,
Yeah.
uh, like possibly will be the one that breaks Wayne Gretzky's scoring record? Will he even be allowed to play in the NHL if there's a World War III because of the tensions with Russia and stuff? I mean,
Well, like I watch Formula One,
mm-hmm,
and their Haas is one of the teams, and they're actually a U.S. team based out of North Carolina. But Mazepin was their driver, who's Russian, and he's also the son of a guy that owns a giant chemical company that he's kind of in Putin's inner circle. So they like he got fired and they kicked out the sponsorship from that company, which I mean they were the main sponsor, so I'm sure that creates a lot of issues with it. But like I don't know if they were prescribing the sanctions like being ahead of it, but um, so that guy lost. You know, there's 20 seats in Formula One, 20 drivers that are driving every week, and he lost
mm-hmm,
a seat. And I don't know if he's totally out of the sport. It's worked out well for Haas because they brought back their test driver, who he was on their test driver, and now
right.
he's uh, Kevin Magnussen, and he finished, I think, fifth in Bahrain this weekend. But it's, I mean, it's weird. It's kind of a weird time. You see all these countries like seizing people's yachts and stuff,
Mm-hmm,
and you're like, well, that's like, I wonder if uh, well, and then Chelsea FC, the football team in
right.
UK, is now I think being sold, but they also had their credit card access cut, and they have limits on how much that they can spend that's agreed upon with the UK government to hold
Right.
matches. So it's either forfeit or do this. I don't think they're allowed to have fans there. It's just kind of it's already it's already gotten pretty wild.
Yeah, and so I'm actually going to bring this back into our overall thing of what the podcast is trying to focus on. So we're talking about financial stuff. We're talking about the world crises at the time. Right now, it's Russia and Ukraine. Um, but we're also talking about energy because every NBA game, they turn it on whether the stadium's full or not.
Yeah.
I'm sure Formula One, that's not like, oh, we're going to use the cheap gas for this race this week. They're paying a premium on this a premium sport. Um, all these events and stuff, these extracurricular things, they require still the same amount of energy, if not more, than they did before the crisis going on. I mean, I know, and again, you've been doing this for years, so it's like, yeah, we don't care about it until we care about it. Um, but
Well, everything is becoming digital,
yeah,
and the more you're just kind of scaling your usage of energy, wires, minerals. So it's kind of resources, like it's, it's just, we live a different world than we did when we were working in the fields all day.
yeah, and our dedication to these sports and to these entertainments are also different because we would, you know, I mean, and no one will ever say it out loud because we don't want to get in trouble at work, but we're all constantly looking at the sport news or the fun news, whatever the fun news is for us, entertainment, Kardashians or whatever.
That's funny.
We're looking at
Goodnews.org.
ESP, yeah, um, and we're checking our phone or we have stuff going on. And back in the day, if you were able to get a day off work and go see one of the baseball teams that played, because they always played at like right in the middle of the workday,
Yeah.
and it was such a big deal to take off, and then that would be something that you and your coworkers might talk about for weeks and stuff. While you're out in the field, you're like, "Hey, yeah, I got to see DiMaggio, get on base again." um, it's just such a different world in so many different ways, and yet it's the exact same. Like everything is different, yet it's all the same.
Yeah.
Um,
It's just,
this is,
it's more connected.
yeah. One of the theologians we spent a lot of time studying was a guy named William James McClendon, um, and this isn't his uniquely, but this is from the people that influenced him. He talks a lot about this is that, and then is now. And that's one of the ways adaptability happens. I mean, he didn't say it like that. He was looking at it again through the lens of the church and how does church get done. But I think this does apply to energy. It does apply to finances. That what's going on now has gone on before, and it might be a little bit different, but it's also exactly the same.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's really changed is maybe this is a Mike McVeigh guess, not a William James McClendon guess, is that we think we're smart enough to somehow get past it this time without the repercussions that we had last
Yeah.
time. But
Yeah. It's like, I try not to follow the news cycle,
right.
but like I schedule time to watch it, and then I have like a lot of data models that I basically watch those to see how stuff is actually moving in the real world,
Hmm.
basically, or the physical world. But it seems like it's escalating. So with the war right now,
Yeah.
and I think the West is, it's just a weird thing. You've got like two people that live in totally different worlds, and I don't know how much communication that they're really trying to do. There's a lot of people that have been pushing for war between US and Russia or China for a long time.
Right.
So it's kind of, I mean, like, I think a lot of people think it's inevitable, and we're there where we're sending weapons to fight. It's basically a proxy war. Um, so it's, it's just like there's a lot of people being hurt pretty
Yeah.
awfully, and that country looks like it's in rubbles, but it's kind of like the same, like you said, it's the same story from a different age, just with different players.
And I guess, and again, you have full edit control.
So,
um, so one of our mutual friends is Les Snyder, who is an English teacher, but really in so many ways a history teacher. Um, and he got me when I first met him. He was like, one of the books every single American needs to read is The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And it was specifically because of a certain presidential election. That's why he wanted to read it.
yeah.
But so I went and read it. I spent read it too fast, but I still read it over Thanksgiving weekend, like the week of Thanksgiving. And the thing that scares me the most, and no matter how many numbers I see reported about Vietnam or Korea, World War II, even Civil War and stuff, Revolutionary War, the description that he uses to talk about when Russia and Germany finally decided to be at odds with each other. Because for those of you that don't know, Russia was actually with Germany at the beginning of Hitler's conquering or going into Poland and stuff. It was actually of a couple stupid things, honestly, that got Stalin and Hitler to go against each other. But Hitler's army was a more powerful army. And when they started going into Russia, and I'm not going to quote it directly because I don't have it. I was using a library book, but basically the way it was described is that Germany would kill hundreds upon hundreds of Russians, and as soon as they were dead, hundreds and hundreds of Russians took the place. And that it was literally just a pure blood massacre
Yeah.
of all these bodies that were basically trying to keep Germany from getting to Stalingrad. And that scares me when we talk about possibly getting into a land war with Russia. Because I think some of the Russian leadership finds that kind of stuff very glorious, to think about that their people would sacrifice themselves that way. Even though it wasn't sacrifice, it was a no choice kind of thing. It was an edict of you're going to die one way or the other, so you might as well die helping out Mother Russia. And, I don't think most Americans would be willing just to throw themselves in front of tanks and stuff. I mean, again, granted, we're a little bit more safe on the land side, but I mean, you're talking about peasants, farmers, their children, wives, and stuff, just throwing their bodies in front of these tanks and these soldiers to basically hold off. Russia didn't win their side because they were more powerful. They just had so many bodies that they basically forced Germans to not be. I mean, like literally, the bodies were so high,
Yeah.
and I think that Putin and Russian leadership aren't afraid to go back to those kinds of tactics. Um, and a side story to even that, I had a friend who served in Somalia, like during the Black Hawk Down period and stuff. That he's and like many people, many of my friends who served in the military in these conflicts and stuff. He's like, yeah, I can't watch those movies and stuff. It was not glorious. My job, um, his job was to shovel bodies into a huge pit.
Burn
That's
pit.
what he spent almost his whole service doing.
That's so real.
Is um,
That's so traumatic.
and probably shouldn't have given the nickname we gave to him. Um, it was more of his attitude towards people than that, but that's what he equated it to. His nickname was Lock and Load,
Oh wow.
and more. Of course, we didn't know any of that story, and I'm not sure how much we would. But if war is if war is inevitable, I always want people to hear those kinds of stories on the side. I don't know again what's going to get cut or what's not, but I mean, in the same way that we're talking about when somebody makes a lot more money, right now our world, if you make more money, there's a good chance it means somebody else is losing money, even though money is supposed to be infinite.
I
You
I
might
personally disagree with that.
well, good. We'll have another debate on that. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that this stuff is real for everybody. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes when we hear Russia and Ukraine, it's so far away that we don't really think that these are people just like you and me who are fighting for their lives, whether they're for Russia or for Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
totally.
and we could definitely argue the money is money limited.
Well, it's kind of like the kamikazes, kamikaze pilots in World
Hmm.
War II. Japan, convinced them that they were honoring their family and they would receive things in heaven essentially by sacrificing their life for the good of the country.
Right.
And when you have people in that mindset, they're able to do like, not incredible necessarily good, but incredible things that you wouldn't realize otherwise. Kind of like the jihadists, suicide bombers. Like it's really, it's interesting, and yeah, I don't know what to say about that, but the world's an interesting place, and um, it's just it's sad to see when that happens to hurt other people
Hmm.
rather than to be like, well, I can put up with immense amount of pain. I'm going to go build a business or go help these people.